Marcus Wellington sat in the leather chair that had belonged to his wife, the one she'd found at an estate sale 7 years ago in Yonkers. Anna had dragged him to the viewing on a Sunday morning, insisting the chair had character. He'd laughed at her, then told her character was just another word for old. Now he couldn't bring himself to replace it, even though the armrest sagged and the cushion held the permanent impression of someone who would never sit there again. The photograph in his hands showed Anna at their wedding, her smile so wide it seemed impossible that a human face could contain that much joy. 3 years since the cancer took her. 3 years of learning to braid hair and pack lunches and answer questions about heaven that he didn't have answers for. 3 years of being both mother and father to a 7-year-old girl who still sometimes called out for mommy in her sleep. Down the hall, Zoe slept peacefully, clutching the stuffed elephant Anna had given her on her 4th birthday. The last gift her mother ever gave her. Marcus had tried once to wash it, but Zoe had screamed so loud that Mrs. Evelyn Carter from next door had knocked to make sure everything was all right. The elephant stayed dirty after that, carried everywhere its grey fur matted from years of desperate love. The clock on the wall read 11:47. Marcus should have been asleep an hour ago. His shift at Ashford Properties started at 6 in the morning, and the subway from the Bronx to Manhattan didn't run on sympathy for tired single fathers. But sleep came harder these days, like his body knew that the quiet hours after Zoe went to bed were the only time he had to remember what it felt like to be something other than a parent. The doorbell shattered the silence. Marcus set down the photograph, his body going rigid. Nobody rang doorbells in this building at midnight unless something had gone wrong. A fire. A break-in. Police looking for someone who wasn't him, but might decide he'd do just fine anyway. He'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know that a black man opening his door to strangers after dark was playing a game where the house always won. The bell rang again, more insistent this time. Marcus moved to the door, checking the peephole first. The woman on the other side stood with her shoulders hunched, her designer coat wrinkled in a way that suggested she'd been wearing it for too many hours. He recognized her immediately. Victoria Ashford, CEO of the company where he spent his days fixing air conditioning units and replacing broken elevator cables. The woman who signed the paychecks that kept his daughter fed and his rent paid. Every instinct told him to pretend he wasn't home. Whatever brought Victoria Ashford to his door at midnight couldn't be good news. But she looked up at the peephole as if she knew he was there, and her eyes held something he'd seen in his own mirror too many times to ignore. Desperation. Marcus opened the door. Her voice came out raw, like she'd been crying for hours. "Mr. Wellington, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." The formal address felt wrong in the narrow hallway of his building where the paint peeled in strips and the overhead light flickered every few seconds. He wanted to ask how she'd gotten his address, but the answer was obvious. Employee files. She probably had access to everything about him, from his social security number to his daughter's school records. "Ms. Ashford." He kept his voice neutral, his hand still on the door. "It's late. I know. I know how this looks." She glanced down the hallway as if checking for witnesses. "Can I come in? Please, just for a few minutes." Every piece of wisdom Marcus had accumulated in 36 years of being a black man in America told him this was a mistake. A white woman. His boss. In his apartment. At midnight. The kind of situation that could get twisted into something ugly faster than he could explain. But Victoria Ashford stood in his hallway looking like she might collapse, and Marcus had never been good at turning away people who needed help. He stepped aside. Victoria walked into his living room and stopped taking in the modest furniture and the children's drawings taped to the refrigerator in the kitchen beyond. Her gaze lingered on the toys scattered in a basket by the couch, the kind of chaos that came from a child who was loved, but not micromanaged. "You have a daughter?" It wasn't a question. Marcus closed the door but didn't lock it. "Zoe. She's 7. Victoria nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already known. She probably did know. Employee files would list dependents. Emergency contacts. Everything an employer needed to understand exactly how much leverage they had over a person's life. She sat down on the couch without being invited, her movements mechanical. Marcus remained standing, positioning himself between her and the hallway that led to Zoe's room. Old habits. Anna used to tease him about it, the way he always put himself between his family and potential danger, even when the danger was just a door-to-door salesman or a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. Victoria pulled a folder from her purse and set it on the coffee table. The leather case looked expensive, the kind of thing that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she stared at it like it might contain a bomb. 4 years ago, my car broke down on the highway near Queens. Her voice had steadied, taking on the controlled tone of someone forcing themselves through a prepared speech. You stopped to help. Do you remember? Marcus remembered. A summer evening, him driving home from a double-shift Victoria's BMW, smoking on the shoulder of the road. He'd pulled over despite knowing it was risky, despite the voice in his head that sounded like his father telling him that helping white women on the side of the road was how black men ended up in jail. But she'd looked scared, and Marcus had never been able to walk past fear without trying to fix it. I called a tow truck. He kept his tone flat, unsure where this was going. Waited until they arrived. You refused money. I tried to give you $200. Victoria looked up at him, and Marcus saw that her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. You told me to pay it forward instead. Seemed like the right thing to do. I thought about that a lot over the years. Victoria finally opened the folder, pulling out a stack of papers. When my father died 2 months ago, I remembered you, the man who helped a stranger and didn't want anything in return. I thought— She stopped, her hands shaking slightly. I thought maybe you'd help me again. Marcus didn't sit down, didn't move closer. The space between them felt important, like a boundary he needed to maintain. What kind of help? Victoria spread the papers across his coffee table. Legal documents heavy with the kind of language that existed to intimidate people who couldn't afford lawyers. Marcus caught words like inheritance and beneficiary and biological child. His stomach tightened. My father left everything to me. The company, the properties, everything he built over 40 years. Victoria's voice cracked. But there's a condition. I have to have a biological child with a legal father on record before my 35th birthday. If I don't, my cousin Donovan inherits everything. Marcus's first thought was that this sounded like something from a movie, the kind of plot that only existed in fiction, written by people who'd never had to worry about real problems. His second thought was darker, more familiar. This woman had come to his apartment at midnight to ask him for something, and whatever it was, he already knew he wasn't going to like it. When's your birthday? April 3rd, 11 months from now. Victoria pulled another document from the folder, this one printed on expensive letterhead. I can offer you $500,000 to be listed as the father on the birth certificate. You wouldn't have to do anything else. No responsibilities, no obligations. Just a signature and a sample for the fertility clinic. The number sat in the room like a weight. $500,000. Enough to move Zoe out of this building where the elevator broke twice a month and the walls were thin enough to hear Mr. Patterson's television at 3 a.m. Enough to pay for college without student loans. Enough to stop lying awake at night doing math in his head, calculating whether he could afford new shoes for Zoe, or if he could make her old ones last another month. Enough to make him hate himself for even considering it. Marcus's voice came out harder than he'd intended. You think I'm the kind of man who sells his children? Victoria flinched. No. God, no. I'm not asking you to sell anything. The child would be mine. Legally, financially, in every way that matters. You'd just be a donor with a legal record. A donor. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a nice word for it. Clinical. Makes it sound like I'd be doing you a favor instead of signing away a piece of myself for money. Mr. Wellington, do you understand what you're asking me? He stepped closer now, and Victoria leaned back slightly. Good. Let her be uncomfortable. I'm a black man in America. You want me to sign a legal document saying I fathered a child I'm not raising. Do you have any idea what that looks like? What people would assume about me? Victoria's face had gone pale. I would sign documents, legal protections. You'd never be held responsible. On paper. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. Sure, on paper I'd be protected, but paper doesn't stop social services from showing up at my door if you change your mind. Paper doesn't stop a judge from deciding I owe child support. Paper doesn't stop your cousin from using this against me if he decides I'm a threat. Donovan wouldn't. You don't know what he'd do, and neither do I. Marcus moved to the door, his message clear. I'm not interested in your offer, Ms. Ashford. I think you should leave. Victoria stood, but she didn't move toward the door. Instead, she stayed frozen in the middle of his living room, and Marcus watched as something shifted in her expression. The controlled CEO mask cracked, revealing the desperate woman underneath. Please. The word came out broken. I've spent the last 2 months trying to find another way. Anonymous donors won't work because the will requires a legal father on record. I can't trust anyone in my circle. They'd use it for leverage, for power, for shares of the company. You're the only person I've ever met who helped me without wanting something in return. I want something now. I want you to leave my home. Victoria's shoulders sagged. She gathered the papers with shaking hands, stuffing them back into the folder without care for their order. Marcus opened the door, holding it wide, but she stopped before crossing the threshold. "I'm not a bad person." Her voice was barely audible. "I know this sounds insane. I know what I'm asking is wrong. But if I lose the company, Donovan gets everything I've built, every building I developed, every deal I closed, every employee I protected. Gone. All of it. Given to a man who's spent his entire career trying to prove I don't deserve what my father gave me." Marcus had heard variations of this story before. Rich people problems? The kind of struggles that only existed when you had enough money to worry about inheritance instead of rent. He should have felt nothing. Should have closed the door and gone back to his chair and his photograph and his memories of a woman who'd never had the luxury of worrying about anything beyond making it to her next paycheck. But something in Victoria's voice reminded him of the way Zoe sounded when she woke from nightmares about her mother. That same quality of fear that came from losing something you couldn't get back. He almost closed the door. Almost. But words came out instead. "If you really wanted my help, you'd have to accept my condition first." Victoria turned, hope flickering across her face. "Anything. Name your price." "Not a price." Marcus met her gaze, making sure she understood the weight of what he was about to say. "You'd move in here, with me and my daughter. 3 months." The silence that followed felt dense enough to touch. Victoria's voice came out strangled. "You're joking." "I'm not." Marcus crossed his arms. "You want me to bring a child into this world, fine. But I won't do it for a woman who thinks a baby is a business transaction. You want my help, you live here. You learn what it means to be part of a family. A real family, not some arrangement on paper. You want me to live here, in this—" Victoria caught herself, but not fast enough. The judgment had already crossed her face, quick and instinctive. "In this apartment." Marcus finished for her, his voice cold. "Yes. In this building in the Bronx where people work for a living and take the subway and don't have housekeepers to clean up after them. You want a child. You're going to learn what it takes to raise one. You're going to eat breakfast with us every morning. You're going to help with homework and dishes and laundry. You're going to understand that children aren't accessories you can hire people to manage." Victoria stared at him like he'd suggested she move to Mars. "For 3 months. 3 months. After that, if you still want to go through with this, we'll talk." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But I won't bring a child into this world just to have its mother disappear. My daughter already lost her mother. I won't create another child who grows up wondering why they weren't worth staying for." The mention of Zoe seemed to cut through Victoria's shock. She glanced down the hallway toward the bedrooms, and something in her expression softened. "Your wife. I'm sorry. I didn't know." "No reason you would." Marcus kept his voice level. "But now you do. So if you want my help, those are my terms. Not negotiable." Victoria looked around the small living room again, and Marcus could see her mind working, calculating, trying to find another option. But he knew what she'd already admitted. There wasn't another option. She'd come to him because she'd exhausted every other possibility. This was her last move, and they both knew it. 3 months. Victoria's voice had gone quiet. "And then we talk about whether you're ready to be a mother, whether you understand what you're asking for." Marcus moved back to the door. "But I'm not promising anything beyond that. You could live here for 3 months and I could still say no." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Marcus almost laughed. "Ms. Ashford, you came to my home at midnight and asked me to sign away parental rights to a child that doesn't exist yet. You offered me money like I'm something you can buy, and you think I'm being unfair by asking you to understand what family means before I agree to create one with you." Victoria's face had gone red, whether from anger or embarrassment Marcus couldn't tell. "I have a company to run. I can't just abandon my responsibilities." "Then we're done here." Marcus held the door wider. "Find someone else to sell you what you want." The hallway beyond stretched dark and empty. Marcus could hear Mr. Patterson's television through the wall, could smell Mrs. Carter's cooking from earlier in the evening. The building settled around them with the familiar creaks of old bones adjusting to the night. Victoria stood at the threshold between his world and hers, and Marcus knew the exact moment she made her decision. Her shoulders dropped. Her perfectly manicured hands relaxed at her sides. The CEO mask slipped away entirely, leaving behind someone who looked exhausted and scared, and very, very alone. "Okay." The word came out barely above a whisper. 3 months. I accept your condition." Marcus studied her face, looking for deception or calculation. He found only resignation. "You can work from here. I'm not asking you to quit your job. But you eat with us. You help with the household. You participate." "I understand." And Zoe doesn't know about any of this. As far as she's concerned, you're a guest who's staying with us. If I hear you mention any of this arrangement to her, you leave immediately. Clear? Clear. Marcus stepped back, letting her fully into the apartment. There's a couch in the living room. I'll get you a blanket and pillow. You can start tomorrow. Victoria nodded, still looking shell-shocked. She set her purse down on the coffee table with careful precision, as if afraid that moving too quickly might shatter whatever fragile agreement they'd just reached. Thank you. I know this is... Don't. Marcus cut her off. Don't thank me yet. You might hate me in a week. He went to the closet and pulled out a spare blanket one Anna had bought from Target 3 years ago. The fabric had faded from too many washes, but it was clean and warm. He brought it back to Victoria along with a pillow that had seen better days. Victoria took them with the careful handling of someone who'd never had to use spare bedding before. Mr. Wellington, I just want you to know... Marcus, he interrupted again. If you're going to live here, you can't keep calling me Mr. Wellington. It's Marcus. Marcus. She tested the name like it was unfamiliar. I'm Victoria, not Ms. Ashford. I know who you are. Marcus moved toward the hallway. Bathroom's the second door on the left. We get up at 6. Zoe has school at 8, so breakfast is at 6:30. Don't be late. He left her standing in the living room with her expensive purse and her expensive clothes and her $500,000 offer that he'd turned into something she clearly hadn't expected. Marcus closed his bedroom door and sat on the edge of his bed, his hands shaking slightly with the adrenaline of what he'd just done. In 3 months, he might regret this. In 3 months, he might look back on this night and wonder what kind of fool invites his CEO to move into his 2-bedroom apartment. But Anna had always said that everyone deserved a chance to understand what love looked like when it didn't come with conditions. Maybe Victoria Ashford needed that lesson. Maybe they all did. Marcus lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling where the paint was starting to yellow. From the living room, he heard Victoria moving around quietly, trying not to disturb anyone. The sounds were unfamiliar wrong. This space had been his and Zoe's for 3 years, their sanctuary, their world. Now Victoria Ashford was in it, and everything was about to change. The alarm went off at 5:45, pulling Marcus from a sleep that had been more restless than restful. He'd dreamed of Anna, of her laughing at him for bringing home a stray CEO like other people brought home puppies. He could almost hear her voice, always picking up broken things, trying to fix them. One day, you're going to pick up something too broken to fix, and then what Marcus showered and dressed in the work clothes that were identical to every other day, jeans, steel-toed boots, a company shirt with his name embroidered over the pocket. When he emerged from his room, Victoria was already awake, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hands. She'd changed into clothes that were still obviously expensive, but at least looked like something a person might sleep in. Her hair was pulled back, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. Without all the polish, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Morning. Marcus kept his voice low, mindful of Zoe still sleeping. Coffee. Victoria nodded, setting her phone aside. Marcus moved to the kitchen and started the ancient coffee maker that Anna had bought at a yard sale 6 years ago. It made terrible coffee, weak and bitter, but replacing it felt like another piece of her he'd be giving up. The machine hissed and gurgled. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway, hovering like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to cross the threshold. Marcus poured 2 cups and handed her one. She took a sip and couldn't quite hide her grimace. It's bad, I know. Marcus leaned against the counter. Anna always said if I wanted good coffee I should learn to make it myself. I never did. Anna was your wife? Yeah. Marcus stared into his mug. Cancer. 3 years ago. Zoe was 4. Victoria's hands tightened around her cup. I'm sorry. I can't imagine... No. Marcus met her eyes. You probably can't, and that's okay. You don't have to. The silence stretched between them, broken by the sound of small feet padding down the hallway. Zoe appeared in her pajamas, her hair a wild tangle around her face, the stuffed elephant dragging behind her. She stopped when she saw Victoria, her eyes going wide. Daddy, who's that? Marcus set down his coffee and moved to his daughter, lifting her into his arms with the practiced ease of 3 years of solo parenting. This is Ms. Victoria. She's going to be staying with us for a while. Zoe studied Victoria with the unfiltered curiosity of a 7-year-old. Are you Daddy's new girlfriend? Victoria's face went red. Marcus fought back a smile. No, baby. Ms. Victoria is a guest. She needs a place to stay, so we're helping her out. Oh. Zoe seemed satisfied with this explanation. She wriggled out of Marcus's arms and approached Victoria with the fearlessness of a child who'd never learned to be afraid of strangers. "Do you like elephants?" Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Yes, I suppose I do." "This is Mr. Snuggles." Zoe held up the worn stuffed animal. "Mummy gave him to me. He's my best friend." Something flickered across Victoria's face, too quick for Marcus to identify. She knelt down to Zoe's level, and Marcus noticed the way her expensive pajamas dragged on his kitchen floor. "He looks like a very good friend." "He is," Zoe beamed. "Do you have a best friend?" Victoria hesitated, and in that pause Marcus saw something that looked like loneliness. "Not really. I'm usually too busy for friends." Zoe's face scrunched up in the way it did when she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "That's sad. Everyone needs friends." "You're right." Victoria's voice had gone soft. "Everyone does." Marcus cleared his throat. "Zoe, go get dressed for school. Ms. Victoria and I need to make breakfast." Zoe ran back down the hallway, Mr. Snuggles bouncing against her side. Marcus turned to Victoria, who was still kneeling on the kitchen floor, looking like someone had just punched her in the stomach. "You okay?" Victoria stood slowly. "She's sweet." "Yeah." Marcus pulled eggs from the refrigerator. "She is, and she's been through enough. So whatever happens between us, whatever arrangement we have, she doesn't get hurt. Understood?" "Understood." Marcus handed Victoria a spatula. "You know how to make scrambled eggs?" Victoria took the utensil like it might bite her. "I've seen it done." "Watching isn't the same as doing." Marcus cracked eggs into a bowl. "Watch me first. Then you try." He demonstrated whisking the eggs with practiced efficiency, adding a splash of milk and a pinch of salt. Victoria watched with the intensity of someone taking notes for a test. When Marcus poured the mixture into the pan, she leaned in closer, studying his technique. "It's just eggs." Marcus kept his voice neutral. "Not rocket science. For you, maybe." Victoria's tone held no defensiveness, just statement of fact. "I haven't cooked in, I don't know, years. I have people who do this." "Well, here you don't have people, you have yourself. Marcus stirred the eggs, watching them begin to solidify. "In this house, everyone contributes. Zoe sets the table. I cook. You're going to learn to do both." Victoria nodded, still watching the eggs like they held secrets. Marcus finished cooking and plated 3 portions. Victoria carried them to the small dining table while Marcus called Zoe back out. His daughter appeared in her school uniform, her hair still a disaster. "Come here, baby. Let me fix that." Marcus sat Zoe down and worked through her tangles with gentle patience. Victoria watched from her seat, her expression unreadable. They ate in relative silence. Zoe chattered about a project at school, about her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who was nice but strict about a boy named Tyler who always stole her crayons. Marcus listened with the half-attention of a parent who'd heard similar stories 1,000 times but knew they mattered anyway. Victoria ate her eggs mechanically, saying nothing. Zoe kept glancing at her like she was a puzzle that needed solving. "Ms. Victoria," Zoe's voice cut through the breakfast sounds. "Why don't you have a family?" Victoria's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus tensed, ready to redirect, but Victoria answered before he could intervene. "I have family. I have a cousin. And I had a father, but he died recently." "Oh," Zoe's face fell. "I'm sorry. It's sad when people die. My mummy died too." "I know." Victoria's voice had gone thick. "Your daddy told me." "Do you miss your daddy?" Victoria set down her fork. "Sometimes. It's complicated." "Why?" "Zoe," Marcus interrupted gently. "Finish your breakfast. We need to leave in 15 minutes. Zoe obeyed, but Marcus saw Victoria's hands shaking slightly as she picked up her fork again. The questions of a child. So innocent. So devastating. Anna had always been better at fielding them, at finding the right words that were honest without being cruel. Marcus just did his best and hoped it was enough. After breakfast, Zoe brushed her teeth while Marcus grabbed his work bag. Victoria stood uncertainly in the living room, looking like she wasn't sure what to do with herself. "There's a spare key in the kitchen drawer." Marcus pulled on his jacket. "Second from the left. You can come and go as you need to. Just be back by 6 for dinner." "What about Zoe?" "After school. Mrs. Carter next door picks her up and watches her until I get home." Marcus checked his wallet. "I work until 3 most days. Sometimes later if there's an emergency." Victoria nodded, processing the logistics. "Is there anything I should do while you're gone?" Marcus considered. "The apartment could use cleaning. Bathroom especially. Supplies are under the sink. He saw Victoria's face pale slightly, but she didn't argue. Progress. Marcus called for Zoe, who came running with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She stopped in front of Victoria and smiled up at her. "Bye, Miss Victoria. I hope you have a good day." Victoria's expression softened. "You too, Zoe." Marcus and Zoe left the apartment, and Marcus heard the door click shut behind them. As they walked down the hallway toward the elevator, Zoe slipped her hand into his. "I like her, Daddy." "You just met her baby." "I know, but she seems lonely, like she needs friends." Zoe squeezed his hand. "Can we be her friends?" Marcus looked down at his daughter at the open trust in her face, the instinct to help that he'd tried so hard to cultivate. Anna would have been proud. "We can try, baby. We can try." The elevator arrived, its doors grinding open with the familiar screech of machinery that needed maintenance nobody could afford. Marcus and Zoe stepped inside, and as they descended toward the lobby, Marcus wondered what Victoria was doing in his apartment. Whether she was already regretting her decision. Whether she'd still be there when he got home. The day at work passed in its usual rhythm of broken equipment and frustrated tenants. Marcus fixed a jammed elevator on the 14th floor, replaced a faulty thermostat in the executive suite, and spent 2 hours diagnosing a water pressure problem that turned out to be a simple clog. Normal. Familiar. The kind of work that let his mind drift while his hands stayed busy. He thought about Victoria alone in his apartment, about what she might be discovering in the bathroom cabinet and the kitchen drawers, about whether she'd actually clean or just spend the day on her phone pretending to fulfill his requirements while waiting for him to give up on this insane experiment. At 2:30, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Is it normal for the bathroom sink to make a whistling sound when you turn on the hot water?" Marcus almost smiled. He typed back, "Yes, it's been doing that for 6 months. Just turn the handle slower." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Okay. Thank you." Marcus pocketed his phone and returned to work, but something in his chest had loosened. She was still there, still trying. At 3:15, Marcus clocked out and caught the subway home. The train was packed with the usual afternoon crowd, students with headphones, workers with tired eyes, mothers with strollers navigating the narrow aisles. Marcus found a seat near the back and let the rhythm of the tracks pull him into a half-doze. His phone buzzed again. This time, Mrs. Carter. "Zoe's asking if Miss Victoria can come over to play. I told her I'd check with you first. Everything okay?" Marcus stared at the message. Zoe had been with Mrs. Carter for less than an hour and was already trying to recruit Victoria for playtime. He typed back, "Everything's fine. Ms. Victoria is a guest staying with us for a while. If she wants to come over, that's okay, Mrs." Carter's response came quickly. "Understood. Zoe's excited to have someone new around. It's good for her." The train lurched to a stop at Marcus's station. He climbed the stairs to street level and walked the 3 blocks to his building, his mind already cataloguing everything that needed to be done before dinner. Laundry, dishes from this morning, figure out what to cook that wouldn't taste terrible. He unlocked the apartment door and stopped. The living room was spotless. The toys that had been scattered in the basket were now organized by type. The coffee table gleamed. The couch cushions had been straightened and the throw blankets folded with military precision. Marcus could smell cleaning solution sharp and chemical. Victoria emerged from the kitchen, her expensive clothes replaced with sweatpants and a t-shirt that looked borrowed from someone else's life. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail and her hands were red from scrubbing. "I hope this is okay." Her voice carried uncertainty. "I didn't want to move anything important, but the place needed—" She stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "I mean, I wanted to help." Marcus set down his bag and looked around again. 3 years of accumulated mess temporarily erased. He should have felt grateful. Instead, he felt exposed, like Victoria had seen too much of his failure to keep his life together. "It's fine." Marcus moved past her into the kitchen. The dishes had been washed and put away. The counters sparkled. Even the coffee maker had been scrubbed clean, though it would make the same terrible coffee tomorrow. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know. But I didn't know what else to do with myself." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "And I figured if I'm going to live here, I should contribute." Marcus opened the refrigerator, taking inventory of what he could make for dinner. Chicken, rice, some vegetables that were approaching their expiration date. Nothing exciting, but it would work. "Mrs. Carter texted, said Zoe wanted you to come over." Victoria's face shifted, something that might have been pleasure crossing her features. "She did. I went over for a little while. We coloured. She's very good at staying in the lines. The image of Victoria Ashford, CEO of a billion-dollar company, sitting on Mrs. Carter's worn carpet coloring with his daughter felt surreal. Marcus pulled out the chicken and set it on the counter. "Did you have fun?" Victoria considered the question like it was a trap. "I think so. I'm not sure I remember what fun feels like." The honesty in that statement hit harder than Marcus expected. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw someone who'd forgotten how to be anything except successful. "Then we're going to have to fix that." "How?" Marcus handed her a cutting board and a knife. "First lesson, how to dice an onion without crying." The onion made Victoria cry anyway. Marcus watched her hack at it with the determination of someone who'd never held a knife for anything more complicated than cutting a steak. Tears streamed down her face as she attacked the vegetable like it had personally offended her. "Slower." Marcus moved beside her, guiding her hand. "You're bruising it. That releases more of the sulfur compounds. Makes it worse." Victoria's jaw clenched with frustration, but she adjusted her technique, slowing down. The pieces came out uneven, some chunks the size of dice, and others barely more than pulp, but it was progress. Marcus swept them into a pan with oil already heating on the stove. "Now what?" "Now you watch them." Marcus handed her a wooden spoon. "Keep them moving. They should turn translucent, not brown. Brown means you burned them." Victoria stood over the pan with the focus of a surgeon performing a critical operation. The onions sizzled and popped. She stirred with careful precision, and Marcus saw her flinch every time oil splattered near her hand. This woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions was terrified of cooking onions. The door opened and Zoe burst in with Mrs. Carter behind her. His daughter's face lit up when she saw Victoria at the stove. "Miss Victoria's cooking." "Learning to cook." Marcus accepted Zoe's hug. "How was school, baby?" "Good. We learned about fractions and I got 100 on my spelling test." Zoe pulled a paper from her backpack, waving it triumphantly. "See, all the words right." Marcus examined the test with the appropriate level of pride. "That's my girl. Go wash your hands for dinner." Zoe ran off down the hallway. Mrs. Carter lingered in the doorway, her eyes moving between Marcus and Victoria with poorly concealed curiosity. The older woman had been their neighbor for 5 years, had helped with Zoe countless times, and Marcus knew she was dying to ask questions. "Thank you for watching her, Mrs. Carter." "Any time, you know that." Mrs. Carter's gaze settled on Victoria, who was still focused on the onions. "Nice to have some help around here, I imagine." Marcus caught the undertone. Mrs. Carter was protective of them, had been since Anna died. Any new woman in Marcus's life would have to pass her inspection, and Marcus could see that inspection happening in real time. "Victoria's staying with us temporarily. A favor for a friend." The lie came easier than it should have. Mrs. Carter nodded slowly, clearly not believing him, but willing to let it slide. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me." After she left, Victoria glanced over her shoulder. "She doesn't trust me. She doesn't know you." Marcus checked the chicken in the oven. "Give her time." "How much time do I have?" 3 months. The bitterness in Victoria's voice was new. Marcus let the question hang while he plated rice and vegetables. They ate dinner with Zoe, filling the silence with stories about her day, about the friend who'd shared her lunch when Zoe forgot hers, about the substitute teacher who let them have extra recess. Victoria listened with an attentiveness that seemed genuine, asking follow-up questions that made Zoe beam. After dinner, Victoria washed dishes without being asked. Marcus supervised Zoe's homework at the table, helping her work through math problems that seemed designed to frustrate second graders. When Zoe finished, she looked at Victoria with hopeful eyes. "Can you read me a story tonight?" Victoria's hands stilled in the dishwater. "I don't know if I'd be very good at it." "Please, Daddy always does voices, but maybe you do different ones." Marcus met Victoria's gaze over Zoe's head. He could see the panic there, the uncertainty, but he also saw something else. The tiniest flicker of want. "You can say no." Marcus kept his tone neutral. "Zoe will understand." Victoria dried her hands on a towel. "Okay, I'll try." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood outside Zoe's bedroom door, listening to Victoria read The Paper Bag Princess, with a stilted delivery that gradually smoothed into something almost natural. She attempted different voices for the dragon and the princess, and Zoe's giggles filtered through the door. When the story ended, Marcus heard Zoe's sleepy voice. "That was good. Will you read again tomorrow?" "If you want me to." "I do. Good night, Miss Victoria." "Good night, Zoe." Victoria emerged from the bedroom with a dazed expression. Marcus had retreated to the couch, pretending he hadn't been eavesdropping. She sat down in the chair Anna used to love, and for a moment neither of them spoke. She asked if I have any children. Victoria's voice was quiet. I told her no. She said I'd be a good mum because I do nice voices. Marcus watched emotions play across Victoria's face, too quick to identify individually, but adding up to something complicated. Kids are honest, sometimes brutally so. She also asked why I look sad all the time. Victoria's laugh had no humour in it. I didn't know how to answer that. What did you say? That sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to explain. Victoria leaned back in the chair, her body language suggesting exhaustion that went beyond the physical. She told me that when she's sad, she hugs Mr. Snuggles and it helps. Then she offered to let me borrow him if I needed to. The image of Zoe offering her most precious possession to a virtual stranger made Marcus's chest tight. His daughter had inherited Anna's instinct for finding wounded things and trying to heal them. Sometimes Marcus worried that instinct would get her hurt. Other times, like now, it reminded him why the world needed people like her. You didn't take him, I hope? God, no. I told her Mr. Snuggles should stay with her. Victoria rubbed her eyes. But it was sweet. She's a good kid. Yeah. Marcus let the silence stretch. She is. Victoria's phone buzzed from where she'd left it on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen, and her expression hardened. Marcus saw the name before she could hide it. Donovan Ashford. You don't have to answer. I know. But Victoria picked up the phone anyway, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Marcus heard her voice low and controlled. What do you want, Donovan? The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When Victoria returned, her face had gone pale. Problem. He knows I'm not at my apartment. He had someone check. Victoria's hands clenched at her sides. He asked where I was. I told him it wasn't his business. Marcus's stomach tightened. Donovan Ashford, CFO of the company where Marcus fixed elevators and unclogged drains. A man with resources and connections, and apparently a habit of tracking his cousin's movements. What did he say? That the board is concerned about my stability, that disappearing without explanation looks irresponsible. Victoria's voice shook slightly. He's positioning himself as the reasonable one, the stable choice if I can't handle the pressure. Is he right about the board? Probably. Victoria sank back into the chair. I've been CEO for 2 months. My father's death left a power vacuum and Donovan's been circling since the funeral. Any sign of weakness and he'll pounce. Marcus processed this information, fitting it into the larger picture of what Victoria had gotten herself into. So, what are you going to do? What I've always done. Work harder. Prove I'm capable. Victoria met his gaze. But I can't do that from here, can I? Not without raising suspicions. You can work remotely. It's not the same. People notice when the CEO isn't in the building. They talk. Donovan will use it against me. Victoria's frustration bled through every word. I accepted your condition, but I'm realizing I might have agreed to something impossible. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Nothing's impossible. It's just harder than you expected. That's easy for you to say. Your job doesn't depend on appearing strong and in control every second of every day. The words hung between them, sharp with accusation. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. You're right. I just fix things when they break. Much simpler. Victoria flinched. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Marcus stood. You meant exactly that. I'm just the help. My problems are small because my world is small. That's not fair. Fair. Marcus's voice rose slightly. Then he checked himself, mindful of Zoe sleeping down the hall. You came to my home asking for help. I gave you a condition and you accepted. Now you're realizing it's harder than you thought and you want to renegotiate. But that's not how this works. Victoria's face reddened. I'm trying. I cleaned your apartment. I read to your daughter. I'm doing everything you asked. For one day. Congratulations. Marcus moved toward the hallway. You have 98 more to go. Think you can manage? He left her sitting in Anna's chair and retreated to his bedroom, closing the door with more force than necessary. Inside, Marcus sat on his bed and pressed his palms against his eyes. Anna's voice echoed in his memory. You always expect too much from people. Not everyone can be as strong as you need them to be. But Marcus hadn't asked Victoria to be strong. He'd asked her to be present, to understand what it meant to be part of something bigger than herself. If she couldn't manage that for 3 months, how could she possibly be a mother for 18 years? Sleep came slowly. Marcus lay in the dark, listening to the building settle around him, and wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The next week passed in a rhythm that felt both foreign and strangely natural. Victoria was gone most days, leaving before Marcus and Zoe woke up and returning just in time for dinner. She kept her promise about participating, but Marcus could see the strain in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her eyes. Running a company while living in the Bronx was taking its toll. On Thursday evening, Marcus arrived home to find Victoria and Zoe in the kitchen attempting to make cookies. Flour dusted the counters and Victoria's face. Zoe was covered head to toe in chocolate chips. "Daddy, we're baking." Marcus surveyed the disaster zone. "I can see that." Victoria looked up from the mixing bowl with something that might have been embarrassment. The recipe said it was easy. Recipes lie. Marcus washed his hands. "What went wrong?" "I think I added too much flour. Or not enough butter. Or both." Victoria gestured helplessly at the dough, which had the consistency of cement. "Zoe wanted cookies, and I thought, how hard could it be?" Marcus examined the mixture. Definitely too much flour. Possibly also too much salt based on the container sitting open on the counter. "This batch is gone. We start over." For the next hour, Marcus walked Victoria through the process, while Zoe offered enthusiastic but unhelpful commentary. Victoria's second attempt came out better, the dough actually resembling something edible. When they pulled the first tray from the oven, the cookies were lopsided and slightly burned on the edges, but Zoe declared them the best cookies ever made. Victoria ate one with an expression of pure surprise. "These are actually good." "Don't sound so shocked." Marcus tried one himself. "Decent. Not great, but decent." "You made them." "With a lot of supervision." "That's how people learn." Marcus started cleaning the flour explosion. "Nobody's born knowing how to bake." Victoria grabbed a dishcloth and joined him. They worked in silence, falling into a pattern they'd developed over the past week. Zoe sat at the table eating cookies and chattering about her upcoming school play, something about pilgrims and Native Americans that made Marcus wince at the historical inaccuracy. Later, after Zoe went to bed, Victoria lingered in the living room instead of retreating to her makeshift bedroom. Marcus had pulled out his laptop to review some maintenance schedules for work. Victoria scrolled through her phone with the glazed expression of someone reading emails they didn't want to read. "Donovan's pushing for a board meeting." She spoke without looking up. "Wants to discuss the company's direction." "When?" "Next week, Tuesday." Victoria set down her phone. "He's going to question my leadership, suggest that I'm not focused, not committed." Marcus saved his work and closed the laptop. "Are you, what, focused, committed?" Marcus met her gaze. "You've been running yourself into the ground trying to do everything. Be CEO, live here, learn to be part of a family. Something's got to give." Victoria's expression hardened. "Nothing gives. I make it work." By sleeping 4 hours a night and drinking coffee like it's water. Marcus had noticed the exhaustion the way Victoria moved through the apartment like a ghost. "That's not sustainable." "I don't have a choice." "Everyone has choices." Marcus leaned back against the couch. "You're just afraid to make the hard ones." Victoria stood abruptly. "You don't understand. If I show any weakness, Donovan wins. He gets the company, gets everything my father built, and I'm left with nothing." "You think money and power are everything?" Says the man who's never had to worry about losing either. Victoria's voice had gone cold. "Easy to be philosophical when you're not the one with something on the line." Marcus felt the anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. "I lost my wife, I'm raising a daughter alone in a city that looks at me like a threat every time I walk down the street. Don't tell me I don't know what it means to have something on the line." The words came out harder than he'd intended, but Marcus didn't take them back. Victoria stared at him, her face pale, and for a moment he thought she might leave. Just pack her things and walk out and never come back. Instead, she sat back down. "You're right. I'm sorry. That was unfair." The apology surprised him. Marcus had expected defensiveness, justification, not surrender. "You're under a lot of pressure. I get that. It doesn't excuse what I said." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. "My father used to tell me that people who complain about their problems are just looking for excuses to fail. I learned not to complain, but I also learned not to see anyone else's problems as real." Marcus absorbed this, fitting it into what he knew about Victoria's life. A father who measured worth in assets and achievements. A mother who'd disappeared from her story without explanation. A woman who'd built her entire identity around being strong enough, good enough, valuable enough to deserve the space she took up in the world. "Your father sounds like he was hard on you." "He was hard on everyone." Victoria's voice went distant. "My mother left when I was 7. Just walked out one day. My father told me it was because I wasn't worth staying for, that if I'd been better, smarter, more lovable, she would have fought to keep me. Marcus's stomach turned. That's not... I know. Victoria cut him off. Intellectually, I know it's not true, but knowing something and feeling it are different things. I've spent my whole life trying to be good enough that people won't leave, good enough that I deserve to exist. The raw honesty in her voice made Marcus's anger evaporate. He thought about Zoe asking why Victoria looked sad all the time. This was why. It was because Victoria had been taught that her worth depended on her productivity, her success, her ability to never show weakness or need or human fragility. Zoe asked me something today. Victoria's words came slowly, carefully. She wanted to know if I was lonely. I told her no, but she didn't believe me. She said I have lonely eyes. Then she asked if that's why I came to stay with you and Daddy. Because I needed friends. What did you tell her? The truth. That yes, I needed friends. That I'd forgotten how to have them. Victoria looked at Marcus directly. She offered to teach me. Said it's easy. You just have to be nice and share your cookies. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Zoe has a gift for making complicated things simple. I wish it were that simple. Victoria's phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. I don't know how to do this, Marcus. Any of this. I don't know how to be part of a family. I don't know how to let people close without measuring what they want from me. And I definitely don't know how to be a mother to a child who'll need more than I know how to give. The vulnerability in her admission felt seismic. Marcus weighed his words carefully. Nobody knows how to be a parent before they become one. Anna and I were terrified when Zoe was born. We read all the books, took all the classes, and the second they put her in our arms, we realized none of it mattered. We were going to mess up. We were going to make mistakes, and we'd have to figure it out as we went. But you had each other. You weren't alone. No. Marcus's throat tightened. We weren't. But then Anna died, and I was alone, and I had to figure out how to be enough for Zoe when I didn't feel like enough for myself. Victoria watched him with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. How did you do it? I showed up. Every day, even when I didn't want to. Even when I felt like I was failing. I just kept showing up. Marcus ran a hand over his face. That's all parenting is, really. Showing up. Being present. Letting them know that whatever happens, you're not going anywhere. The weight of those words settled between them. Victoria's eyes had gone bright, though, whether from tears or something else Marcus couldn't tell. She opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. This time she looked at it, and Marcus saw her expression change. What is it? Victoria's hands had started shaking. There's someone outside, watching the building. Marcus moved to the window, careful to stay to the side so he couldn't be seen from the street. A dark sedan sat across from the entrance engine running. As Marcus watched, a man in the driver's seat raised a camera and snapped several photos of the building. You recognize him? No, but I recognize the tactic. Victoria's voice had gone flat. Donovan's having me followed. Marcus's mind raced through implications. A private investigator photographing Victoria going in and out of his building. The optics of a CEO living in the Bronx with a male employee. The ammunition it would give Donovan in his campaign to undermine her. But more than that, Marcus thought about Zoe, about her safety, about what it meant that someone was surveilling their home. You need to handle this. Marcus's tone left no room for argument. Tonight. Victoria nodded, already dialing. Marcus couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but he caught enough of Victoria's side to understand she was calling her lawyer. The call lasted 10 minutes. When Victoria hung up, some of the shake had left her hands. He's sending someone to identify the investigator, get license plate information, build a case for harassment if we need it. Victoria moved to the window, staring down at the sedan. This is escalating faster than I expected. Donovan's scared. Marcus stayed back from the window. You wouldn't be worth following if you weren't a threat. A threat living in secret with her employee. That's the story he'll tell. Victoria's jaw clenched. I've given him exactly what he needed to destroy me. Marcus wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. The optics were terrible. A CEO disappearing to the Bronx, living with a subordinate hiding from the board. It didn't matter that nothing inappropriate was happening. Perception would be enough. Then you go to the board first. Marcus moved away from the window. Control the narrative. And tell them what
That I'm living here because I made a deal with you that I need your help to fulfill my father's insane will." Victoria laughed bitterly. "That's so much better. You tell them you're doing community outreach, getting perspective on the lives of your employees, understanding the challenges they face." Marcus was improvising, but the idea had merit.
Ashford Properties develops low-income housing, right? What better way to understand your market than to live in it? Victoria stared at him. That's actually not terrible. Corporate spin. Make your weakness look like strength. Marcus shrugged. I don't like it, but if it keeps Donovan from using this against you, it's worth considering. Victoria pulled out her phone again, typing rapidly. Marcus watched her transform in real time, the vulnerable woman from moments ago disappearing behind the CEO mask. It was impressive and deeply sad in equal measure. I'm scheduling a meeting with my communications director, first thing tomorrow. Victoria's fingers flew across the screen. We'll craft a statement. Get ahead of whatever Donovan's planning. Good. Victoria looked up from her phone. Thank you for thinking of that. I was so focused on the problem I couldn't see the solution. That's what happens when you're too close to something. Marcus headed toward the hallway. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be rough. He left Victoria in the living room, her phone still glowing in the darkness. In his bedroom, Marcus stood at the window and looked down at the sedan. The investigator was still there, patient and persistent. Marcus thought about calling the police, but what would he say? Someone's taking pictures of a public street. Not illegal, not even unusual in a city where surveillance was everywhere. But it felt invasive, threatening, like the walls around the small world he'd built for himself and Zoe were being tested, probed for weaknesses. Marcus pulled the curtains closed and got ready for bed. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the building. Somewhere around 2 a.m, he heard Victoria moving around the living room. He almost got up to check on her, but something stopped him. She needed to figure out how to handle her own insomnia. The next morning, Victoria was gone before Marcus woke up. A note on the counter in her precise handwriting. Early meeting. We'll try to be back for dinner. Thank you for last night. Marcus showed the note to Zoe over breakfast. His daughter read it carefully, her lips moving as she sounded out the bigger words. Miss Victoria says thank you. What did you do, Daddy? Helped her with a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus spread peanut butter on toast, measuring his words. Sometimes grown-ups have work problems that are complicated. Miss Victoria's dealing with some of those. Zoe accepted this with the easy trust of childhood. I'm glad she's staying with us. I like having her here. Yeah. Marcus handed Zoe her toast. Why's that? Because she needs us. Zoe said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And it's good to help people who need you. You taught me that. Marcus's chest tightened with pride and fear in equal measure. His daughter had learned the lesson too well. Someday, that instinct to help would get her hurt, and Marcus wouldn't be able to protect her from it. You're right, baby. It is good to help people. Marcus smoothed down Zoe's hair. But you also have to know when to protect yourself, when to say no. Did you say no to Miss Victoria? At first. Then I changed my mind. Why? Marcus thought about that question. Why had he changed his mind? Why had he opened his door to a woman who could complicate his life in ways he couldn't fully predict? Because sometimes people need a second chance, a chance to learn how to be better. Zoe nodded solemnly. Like when Tyler stopped taking my crayons after I told him it made me sad. Exactly like that. They finished breakfast, and Marcus walked Zoe to school. The investigator's sedan was gone, but Marcus felt eyes on him anyway. Paranoia or justified caution, he couldn't tell. At the school entrance, Zoe hugged him tight. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby. Have a good day. Marcus watched her disappear into the building before heading to work. The subway was crowded, pressing him against strangers who avoided eye contact with practiced skill. Marcus thought about Victoria heading to her office about the meeting she'd scheduled about the battle she was fighting. At work, Marcus's supervisor caught him in the hallway. Gerald Thompson had been with Ashford Properties for 20 years, had survived 3 CEOs, and had the kind of institutional knowledge that made him invaluable. Wellington, need to talk to you. Marcus followed Gerald into the maintenance office, a cramped space filled with tools and work orders. Gerald closed the door and turned with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Word is, you know Ms. Ashford, the CEO. Marcus's stomach dropped. We've met. That's not what I'm hearing. Gerald crossed his arms. I'm hearing she's been staying at your place. That true? The question hung in the air. Marcus weighed his options. calculated the risks of truth versus lies. Gerald was fair, but he was also loyal to the company. Whatever Marcus said here would find its way to someone with authority. She's a guest, temporarily. Gerald's eyebrows rose. A guest? Yeah. Marcus held his ground. She needed a place to stay. I had space. That's all there is to it. You understand how that looks? Employee and CEO living together. Gerald's tone wasn't accusatory, just concerned. People are talking, Marcus, and talk like that can cost you your job. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Gerald leaned against his desk. I like you. You do good work. But this company's going through some changes. Power struggles at the top. You don't want to get caught in the crossfire. Marcus absorbed this information. Gerald was telling him something important, something beyond the surface warning. What changes? CFO Ashford's been asking questions. About you. About your work history. About your daughter. Gerald's expression darkened. That man doesn't ask questions without a reason. Whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. After Gerald left, Marcus stood alone in the maintenance office, his mind spinning. Donovan Ashford asking about Zoe, the investigator outside his building, Victoria's growing paranoia about being watched. The pieces were forming a picture Marcus didn't like. He pulled out his phone and texted Victoria. We need to talk, tonight. It's important. The response came back immediately. Okay, I'll be home by 6. Marcus spent the rest of his shift distracted, making mistakes he usually never made. A misconnected wire, a stripped bolt. Gerald noticed, but didn't comment, just watched Marcus with the concerned distance of someone who'd seen this story play out before. At 3 o'clock, Marcus clocked out and headed home. The sedan was back parked in a different spot, but still obvious to anyone who knew to look. Marcus didn't acknowledge. It didn't give whoever was inside the satisfaction of knowing they'd been noticed. Mrs. Carter had Zoe in her apartment when Marcus arrived. Through the door, he could hear his daughter laughing at something on television. Marcus knocked, and Mrs. Carter answered, her expression carefully neutral. Everything all right, Marcus? Fine. Just been a long week. Mrs. Carter's eyes searched his face. Your guest settling in okay? The emphasis on guest carried layers of meaning. Marcus forced a smile. She's adjusting. Good. Zoe seems fond of her. Mrs. Carter stepped aside so Zoe could run to Marcus. But you be careful. That woman's got trouble written all over her. Marcus wanted to defend Victoria, but Mrs. Carter wasn't wrong. Trouble had followed Victoria to his doorstep and showed no signs of leaving. He thanked Mrs. Carter and took Zoe home, where they started on homework, while Marcus tried to figure out how to explain to Victoria that Donovan was investigating not just her, but them. Victoria arrived at 6:15, looking exhausted but composed. She'd changed into casual clothes at some point, though even her casual clothing cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. Zoe greeted her with enthusiastic affection, showing off a drawing she'd made at school. That's beautiful. Victoria examined the picture with genuine interest. Is that Mr. Snuggles? And you and Daddy and me. We're at the park, Zoe beamed. I'm going to put it on the fridge. After Zoe ran off, Victoria turned to Marcus. You said we needed to talk. After dinner, when Zoe's in bed. Victoria nodded, understanding the need for privacy. They moved through the evening routine with practiced efficiency. Dinner dishes, homework check, bedtime story. Victoria had improved at reading her voices, getting more confident, her delivery more natural. When she emerged from Zoe's room 40 minutes later, Marcus was waiting on the couch. Victoria sat in Anna's chair, bracing herself. What happened? Marcus told her about Gerald's warning, about Donovan's inquiries, about the questions that had been asked regarding Zoe. With each detail, Victoria's face grew paler. He's building a case against me, not just professionally, personally. Victoria's voice shook. He's going to paint me as unstable, inappropriate. He'll say I'm endangering your daughter by involving her in my problems. Is he wrong? The question came out harsher than Marcus intended, but he needed to hear her answer. Victoria flinched but met his gaze. I don't know. Maybe. I came here thinking I could keep my problems separate from your life, but Donovan's making that impossible. Victoria stood pacing. I should leave. Tonight. Before this gets worse. And go where? Back to your penthouse, where he can keep tabs on you more easily? Marcus leaned forward. Running doesn't solve the problem. Neither does staying. Victoria's hands clenched. He's threatening your job, Marcus, your livelihood, how you support Zoe. I can't be responsible for that. Marcus thought about his daughter asleep down the hall. about the life he'd built for them in this small apartment with its bad coffee and creaky floors, about what he'd risked to help someone who'd forgotten how to help themselves. "You're not responsible for Donovan's choices, only your own." Marcus met Victoria's eyes. "So choose. Do you want to fight him, or do you want to let him win?" Victoria stopped pacing. "If I fight, he'll come after you harder. He'll find ways to hurt you, hurt Zoe. Let me worry about that." "No." Victoria's voice turned sharp. "You don't get to decide what risks I take with your family. That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, but you already knew that." Marcus stood. "Here's what I know. You came here asking for help. I gave you a condition and you accepted. 3 months. We're 3 weeks in. You want to quit now, that's your choice. But don't do it because you're scared. Do it because you genuinely believe running is the right answer." Victoria stared at him, emotions warring across her face. Fear, anger, something that might have been hope. "I don't want to run." "Then don't. But I also can't stay if it puts Zoe at risk." Marcus considered this. "Tomorrow I'll talk to a lawyer. Make sure there's no legitimate way Donovan can use this situation against me legally. You'll do the same on your end. We'll figure out the risks and make a plan. And if the risks are too high, then we'll deal with that when we know for sure." Marcus moved toward the hallway. "But we don't make decisions based on fear of what might happen. We make them based on what we know is true." Victoria nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Okay. We talk to lawyers. We make a plan." "Good." Marcus paused at his bedroom door. "And Victoria, whatever happens, we're in this together now. You're not alone anymore." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Victoria's eyes went bright with unshed tears, and for a moment Marcus thought she might break down entirely. But she held herself together, nodding once before retreating to the living room. Marcus closed his bedroom door and sat on his bed wondering what he'd just committed himself to. A battle with a powerful man who had resources Marcus couldn't match. A risk to his job and his family's security. All for a woman he barely knew who was trying to learn how to be human again. Anna would have done the same thing. She'd always believed that everyone deserved a chance to become better than they were. Marcus just hoped that belief wouldn't cost him everything he had left. The lawyer Marcus found worked out of a cramped office in Harlem, 3 floors above a bodega that sold lottery tickets and cheap beer. Raymond Hayes had handled Anna's will 3 years ago, charging rates Marcus could actually afford while still doing competent work. The man looked exactly as Marcus remembered, 50s greying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Raymond listened to Marcus's explanation with no visible reaction, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Marcus finished, Raymond set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "So, let me make sure I understand. Your CEO came to your apartment, offered you $500,000 to father her child, and you countered by demanding she live with you for 3 months. That's the summary, yes." Raymond's mouth twitched. "Marcus, I've known you for 3 years. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard you do. I'm aware." "Good, because we need to address just how many ways this could go wrong." Raymond picked up his pen again. "First, the company's fraternization policy. You read your employee handbook? Not recently. Employees who engage in romantic or personal relationships with supervisors can be terminated. Both parties." Raymond tapped his pen against the pad. "Now, you're not technically in a romantic relationship but living together. That's going to be hard to defend as purely professional." Marcus had anticipated this. "She's a guest. I'm providing temporary housing as a favor." "To your boss. Who's paying you for this favor?" "She offered. I refused." Raymond's eyebrows rose. "You refused $500,000? I asked for something different." "Right. 3 months of playing house." Raymond made another note. "Here's the problem. If Donovan Ashford wants to make trouble, he can argue that you're coercing Victoria. That you leveraged your position as someone she came to for help to extract concessions." Marcus's stomach tightened. "That's not what happened. Doesn't matter. It's what a lawyer could argue happened." Raymond leaned forward. "Marcus, you're a black man in America. You know how this works. The optics of you having any kind of arrangement with a wealthy white woman who's also your employer, that's ammunition in the wrong hands." The words confirmed Marcus's deepest fears. He'd known the risks intellectually, but hearing them stated plainly made them real. "So what do I do?" "Document everything. Every interaction, every conversation, every agreement. Get it in writing." Raymond pulled out a blank contract form. "We're going to draft a housing agreement. Victoria pays rent. Fair market value for the area. That makes her a tenant, not a guest. It establishes a legal relationship that has nothing to do with your employment. She won't like that. She'll like it better than getting dragged through a harassment lawsuit. Raymond started writing. How much is rent in your building for a two-bedroom? Marcus told him. Raymond's expression suggested he thought the number was depressingly low, but he wrote it down anyway. They spent the next hour working through details, lease terms, security deposit, house rules. Raymond transformed Marcus's informal arrangement into something that could withstand legal scrutiny. This doesn't solve all your problems. Raymond handed Marcus the draft contract, but it gives you cover. If Donovan comes after you, you can show that this is a standard landlord-tenant situation, nothing inappropriate. And my job? Can he still get me fired? Possibly. But it's harder if you can demonstrate that the living arrangement is separate from your employment, that you're not receiving special treatment at work, that your performance hasn't changed. Raymond steepled his fingers. Have you asked for promotions? Raises, better shifts? No. Good. Don't. Maintain complete separation between your personal and professional lives. Let Victoria's behavior speak for itself. If she's treating you the same as any other employee, Donovan doesn't have grounds to claim favoritism. Marcus folded the contract and put it in his jacket pocket. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is a band-aid on a bullet wound. Raymond's expression turned serious. Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you. What you're doing is dangerous. Not just legally, personally. You're inviting chaos into your life and Zoe's life. You sure this is worth it? Marcus thought about Victoria reading to Zoe, her voice gaining confidence with each story, about the way she'd cried after Zoe offered to lend her Mr. Snuggles, about the woman who was learning that her worth wasn't measured in quarterly earnings and board approvals. I'm sure, Raymond sighed. Then be careful. And call me if anything changes. Marcus left the office and took the subway downtown to Ashford Properties. Victoria had texted him an address earlier, a coffee shop near the office where she could meet during her lunch break. Marcus found her in a corner booth, laptop open, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She glanced up when Marcus slid into the seat across from her. How'd it go? Marcus pulled out the contract. My lawyer drafted this. It's a rental agreement. You pay me fair market rent for staying in my apartment. Makes you a tenant legally. Creates separation between the living situation and our work relationship. Victoria scanned the document, her business brain clearly cataloguing every clause. This is smart. Protects both of us. That's the idea. How much do I owe you for the lawyer? Nothing. He's a friend. Victoria's jaw tightened. Marcus, I can't keep letting you absorb costs for my problems. You're not. I needed legal advice. I got it. Marcus kept his voice level. Besides, you're about to start paying rent. That covers it. Victoria pulled out a pen and signed the contract without hesitation. Her signature was aggressive, confident, the mark of someone used to signing important documents. When does this start? Retroactive to when you moved in, which means you owe me 3 weeks of back rent. Victoria did math in her head. I'll write you a check tonight. Cash is fine. I don't carry that much cash. Marcus almost smiled. Of course she didn't. People like Victoria moved money through apps and wire transfers, not bills in a wallet. Then a check, but it goes in my bank account. No charitable donations to some fund you create. Actual rent. Understood. Victoria closed her laptop. I met with my lawyer this morning. She's concerned about Donovan's investigation. She thinks he's looking for evidence of impropriety. Anything he can use to paint me as unstable or unfit for leadership. Your lawyer have suggestions? Transparency. She wants me to go to the board voluntarily, explain the living situation before Donovan can weaponize it. Victoria's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Frame it as an initiative, understanding our tenants by living as they do. That's what I suggested. I know, and it's good advice, but it requires me to admit vulnerability, to acknowledge that I need to learn from people below my station. Victoria's voice carried self-awareness without self-pity. My ego doesn't like it. Your ego will survive. Victoria's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. Probably. My lawyer's drafting a statement for the board meeting next week. She'll spin it as bold leadership, innovative thinking, all the buzzwords that make executives feel good about themselves. Marcus watched her transform back into the CEO, the mask sliding into place. You don't have to do that with me. Do what? Pretend. Put on the armor. Marcus leaned back against the booth. I've seen you make cookies with flour all over your face. I've heard you read princess stories with silly voices. You don't have to be the CEO right now. Victoria's hands stilled on her cup. For a moment, Marcus thought she might drop. The pretense might let him see the person underneath all the corporate polish. Instead, She checked her watch. I need to get back. Conference call in 20 minutes. Marcus recognized the deflection but didn't push. They were 3 weeks in. Victoria was learning, but slowly. He stood and left her in the coffee shop, returning to work where Gerald was waiting with a clipboard and a knowing expression. Heard you took a long lunch. Had an errand. That errand have anything to do with Ms. Ashford? Gerald didn't wait for an answer. Word of advice, Marcus. Whatever you're involved in, keep your head down. Do your work. Don't give anyone ammunition. Marcus took the clipboard and scanned the work orders. A broken HVAC system on the 30th floor. A stuck door in the parking garage. Routine problems with routine solutions. I always do my work. I know. That's the only reason I'm not more worried. Gerald walked with Marcus toward the elevator. But these corporate games, they chew up people like us and spit us out. You remember that. The warning stayed with Marcus through his afternoon shift. He fixed the HVAC system, finding a blown capacitor that would cost the company $1,000 to replace. He freed the stuck garage door, discovering that someone had tried to force it open rather than calling maintenance. Simple problems, clear solutions, not like the mess he'd made of his personal life. At 3 o'clock, Marcus got a call from Zoe's school. His daughter had gotten into a fight on the playground. Nothing serious, but the school needed him to come in and discuss it. Marcus's chest tightened as he drove to the elementary school, trying to imagine what could have prompted Zoe to hit another student. Principal Morrison met him in the main office, her expression sympathetic but firm. Mr. Wellington, thank you for coming in. Zoe's in the conference room with Mrs. Henderson. Marcus followed Morrison to a small room where Zoe sat with red eyes and crossed arms. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, looked tired. Marcus sat down next to his daughter, searching her face for injury. You okay, baby? Zoe nodded but didn't speak. Principal Morrison took a seat across from them, folding her hands on the table. Zoe hit Tyler Thompson during recess, gave him a bloody nose. Morrison's tone was carefully neutral. According to witnesses, Tyler said something that upset Zoe. She reacted physically. Marcus looked at his daughter. What did Tyler say? Zoe's voice came out small and angry. He said Ms. Victoria is your girlfriend, and that's why Mommy died. Because God needed to make room for her. Marcus's vision went red for a moment. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not storm out of this office and find Tyler Thompson's parents. Beside him, Zoe was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. That's not true, Daddy. I know that's not true. But he kept saying it and everyone was laughing and I just got so mad. Marcus pulled Zoe into his arms, letting her cry against his shoulder. Over her head, he met Principal Morrison's eyes. I understand why Zoe reacted, but we have a zero-tolerance policy on violence. Morrison's sympathy was genuine, but unchanging. She'll be suspended for 2 days, starting tomorrow. What about Tyler? For what he said. Tyler will be disciplined for his words, but his punishment doesn't negate Zoe's actions. Morrison softened slightly. Mr. Wellington, I know you're going through changes at home. The students have noticed. Children talk. Sometimes they repeat things they hear from adults without understanding the harm. Marcus understood what Morrison wasn't saying. Tyler's parents had been gossiping, speculating about Marcus's relationship with Victoria. Their son had absorbed their words and weaponized them on the playground. And now Zoe was paying the price. We'll serve the suspension. Marcus's voice came out tight. It won't happen again. I hope not. Zoe's a good student. This is out of character for her. Morrison stood. Take the rest of the day. I'll email you the homework she'll miss. Marcus led Zoe out of the school, his hand protective on her shoulder. In the car, she stayed silent, staring out the window. Marcus drove home on autopilot, his mind spinning through implications. The gossip had reached Zoe's school, was reaching into her social circle, poisoning her world with adult complications she shouldn't have to navigate. At home, Victoria was already there, working at the kitchen table. She looked up when they entered, surprise crossing her face. You're home early. Marcus guided Zoe toward her bedroom. Go clean up, baby. We'll talk in a minute. After Zoe disappeared down the hall, Marcus turned to Victoria. We have a problem. He explained what had happened at school, watching Victoria's face go from confusion to horror to something that looked like guilt. When he finished, she stood and moved to the window, staring out at nothing. This is my fault. I brought this into her life. Tyler Thompson brought this into her life. His parents, who can't keep their mouths shut, brought this into her life. Marcus's anger was cold and controlled. But yes, This is happening because you're here. Victoria flinched. I should go. Where? Back to your penthouse, where Donovan can continue building his case, where you'll be alone with nobody to help you figure out how to be human. Marcus shook his head. Running doesn't fix this. Neither does staying if it hurts Zoe. Zoe hit a kid because that kid attacked her family. That's not wrong. The suspension is just the consequence. Marcus moved closer to Victoria. What's wrong is that people are talking, making assumptions, treating our lives like entertainment. Victoria's shoulders hunched. I don't know how to stop that. You can't, but you can control the narrative. Marcus pulled out his phone. Call your communications director. Move up the board announcement. Make it public before the gossip spreads further. Own this before someone else defines it for you. Victoria looked at him with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. If I announce publicly that I'm living in the Bronx as part of a community initiative, it'll draw even more attention, more scrutiny. Better than letting people create their own story. Marcus's voice gentled slightly. You taught me that. Control the narrative. Victoria pulled out her own phone fingers, hovering over the screen. Marcus saw her wrestling with the decision, weighing risks against benefits, calculating odds, the way she'd been trained to calculate everything. Finally, she made the call. Jennifer, it's Victoria. I need you to draft a press release. Tonight. I'm announcing a new company initiative. She paused, listening. No, it can't wait. I need this out by tomorrow morning. Marcus left her to handle the details and went to check on Zoe. His daughter was sitting on her bed. Mr. Snuggles clutched tight, her face still blotchy from crying. Am I in trouble? Marcus sat beside her, pulling her close. You're suspended from school. That's your punishment for hitting Tyler. But I'm not mad at you for defending our family. Mrs. Morrison said violence is never the answer. Mrs. Morrison's right. Violence shouldn't be the first answer. But sometimes people say things that hurt worse than punches. Marcus tilted Zoe's face up to meet his eyes. Tyler was wrong about Ms. Victoria, and he was wrong about Mommy. Your mother died because she got sick, not because of anything anyone did or didn't do. You understand? Zoe nodded. I know, but it still hurt when he said it. I know, baby. Words can hurt as much as anything physical. Marcus wiped a tear from her cheek. But next time someone says something mean, you come tell a teacher. You tell me. You don't hit. Even if they're being really mean. Even then. Because when you hit someone, you're letting them control you. You're giving them power over your actions. Marcus smoothed her hair back. You're stronger than that. You're better than that. Zoe leaned against him, and they sat in silence for a while. Finally, she whispered, Are people going to keep saying mean things about Ms. Victoria? Probably. People talk about things they don't understand. But we understand. We know she's nice and she's learning and she needs help. Zoe's voice carried the certainty of childhood. So it doesn't matter what other people think. Marcus wished he had that kind of certainty. Wished he could believe that doing the right thing was enough, that public opinion didn't matter, that protecting Victoria wouldn't cost him and Zoe more than they could afford. But he was an adult living in a world where perception shaped reality and gossip could destroy lives. You're right, baby. What matters is what we know to be true. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Now you're suspended for 2 days, which means you'll be home with me tomorrow and the next day. We'll do your homework together, and you'll write an apology letter to Tyler. But he started it, and you finished it. Both things can be true. Marcus stood. Come on, let's make dinner. They emerged from the bedroom to find Victoria still on the phone, her voice clipped and professional as she dictated terms to her communications team. Zoe went straight to her homework folder, while Marcus started pulling out ingredients for pasta. Simple. Familiar. Something he could make while his mind worked through bigger problems. Victoria hung up 20 minutes later, exhaustion written across every line of her body. It's done. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm announcing a 6-month community initiative where senior executives will spend time living in properties we manage, understanding tenant perspectives, improving company policy from the ground up. That's bigger than just you living here. It has to be. If it's just me, it looks like a stunt. But if it's a company-wide program, it's innovation. Victoria rubbed her temples. I'm making 3 other executives participate. They're not happy, but they'll do it. Marcus stirred pasta sauce, processing this information. So you're weaponizing my suggestion. I'm executing it at scale. That's different. Victoria moved into the kitchen, watching him work. Is Zoe okay? She will be. Kids are resilient. Marcus tasted the sauce, added more garlic. But this is going to keep happening. People are going to talk, make assumptions. Zoe's going to hear things. I know. And I'm sorry. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I never wanted to hurt her. Intent doesn't matter as much as impact. Marcus turned off the stove. But we're in it now, so we deal with it. Dinner was quiet. Zoe picked at her food, still processing the day's events. Victoria ate mechanically, clearly exhausted, but forcing herself to participate. Marcus filled the silence with observations about his day, carefully edited to remove anything that might worry Zoe further. After dinner, Zoe asked Victoria to read to her. Marcus watched Victoria's surprise morph into something softer, and the two of them disappeared down the hallway while Marcus cleaned up. He could hear Victoria's voice through the door, steadier now, more confident in the rhythm of the story. When Victoria emerged, she found Marcus on the couch reviewing Zoe's homework assignments for the next 2 days. She sat in Anna's chair, and for a while they existed in companionable silence. I talked to my lawyer about the will. Victoria broke the quiet carefully. Asked her to review the exact wording of my father's conditions. Marcus looked up from the homework. And there's more flexibility than I thought. The will requires a biological child with a legal father on record. But it doesn't specify marriage, doesn't require cohabitation, just genetic material and legal acknowledgement. Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. My lawyer thinks I could use a sperm donor and have you sign paperwork acknowledging paternity. No pregnancy required on my end. Marcus set down the papers. You'd use a surrogate, or adopt the embryo myself later. The point is, there might be a workaround, a way to satisfy the will's requirements without... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Without having to pretend to be a family for 3 months. Yes. Victoria met his eyes. I know that was the deal. I'm not trying to back out. But I also don't want to keep disrupting Zoe's life. Today proved that my presence here has consequences. Maybe we need to reconsider the approach. Marcus thought about the contract in his pocket, about Raymond's warnings, about Gerald's concern. Thought about Zoe crying in the principal's office, and Victoria's growing exhaustion, and the investigator in the sedan, who was probably still parked outside his building. The whole point of the 3 months was for you to learn what family means, to understand what you'd be creating. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. Taking a shortcut defeats that purpose. But at what cost? Victoria's frustration bled through. Zoe got suspended because of me. You're risking your job because of me. Your entire life is being upended because I showed up at your door with an impossible request. That was my choice. I could have said no. But you didn't. And I'm grateful. But I'm also realizing that my problems don't exist in a vacuum. They spill over. They contaminate everything they touch. Victoria stood pacing. Maybe the right thing to do is to find another solution. Stop dragging you and Zoe through my mess. Marcus watched her spiral, recognizing the pattern. When things got hard, Victoria's instinct was to run, to protect herself by cutting ties before anyone could get close enough to hurt her. She'd learned it from a mother who left, and a father who taught her that dependence was weakness. You know what Zoe said to me today? Marcus's words stopped Victoria's pacing. She said it doesn't matter what other people think, because we know the truth. We know you're a good person who's trying to learn how to be better. Victoria's eyes went bright. She said that she's 7. She sees things simply. Good people, bad people, people who need help. Marcus stood and moved closer to Victoria. She's not wrong. You are trying. That counts for something. Even if trying isn't enough. Trying is always enough. It's just not always easy. Marcus held her gaze. 2 months left. That's all. Then we reassess. But don't quit because it got hard. Don't prove your father right by running when things get complicated. The mention of her father hit its mark. Victoria's spine straightened, her jaw set. I'm not running. Good. Because Zoe would miss your bedtime stories. Victoria's expression cracked into something that might have been a smile. I've gotten better at the voices. You have. The moment stretched between them, fragile and important. Marcus saw Victoria wrestling with vulnerability, saw her wanting to say something more but not knowing how. Finally, she just nodded and retreated to the living room, to her laptop and her emails and the familiar comfort of work that could be controlled. Marcus went to his bedroom and lay awake for a long time, listening to the building settle. Around midnight, he heard Victoria moving around, her insomnia as predictable as his own. He thought about going out there offering to talk, but something held him back.
Victoria needed to learn how to sit with discomfort, how to exist in uncertainty without immediately trying to fix or flee from it. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Victoria already dressed and ready to leave. She'd left a check on the counter for 3 weeks of back rent, the amount precise to the dollar. Zoe emerged from her room still in pajamas, the reality of suspension not yet fully processed. No school today. No school. Marcus started breakfast.
But we're still doing your homework, all of it. Zoe made a face, but didn't argue. After Victoria left for work, Marcus settled in for a day of enforced father-daughter time. They worked through math problems and reading comprehension. They wrote the apology letter to Tyler, with Marcus guiding Zoe toward genuine remorse rather than hollow words. By lunch, Zoe was restless. "Can we go to the park?" Marcus hesitated. The park meant potential encounters with other parents, other opportunities for gossip and questions. But keeping Zoe locked in the apartment felt like letting the rumors win. "Yeah, we can go to the park." They walked the 4 blocks to the small playground near their building. The space was mostly empty on a weekday morning, just a few toddlers with their caregivers and one older kid on the swings. Zoe ran straight for the slide, her earlier mood temporarily forgotten. Marcus sat on a bench watching his daughter play, trying to remember the last time he'd done this without checking his phone or thinking about work or worrying about the future. Anna used to scold him for it, for always being mentally somewhere else, even when his body was present. She'd made him promise to pay attention to Zoe, to really see her, to understand that childhood was brief and irretrievable. He'd kept that promise after Anna died, but lately he'd been slipping. Too focused on Victoria's problems, on Donovan's threats, on managing the chaos that had invaded their quiet life. "Mr. Wellington." Marcus looked up to find a woman he vaguely recognized from school functions. Tyler Thompson's mother. His body tensed, automatically preparing for confrontation. "Mrs. Thompson?" She sat on the bench beside him, uninvited, but not unwelcome. "I heard about what happened. I wanted to apologize for Tyler. What he said was cruel and unacceptable." Marcus hadn't expected an apology. He studied her face, looking for insincerity, but found only genuine regret. "Kids repeat what they hear." The words came out more pointed than Marcus intended. Mrs. Thompson flinched. "You're right. Tyler heard his father and I talking. We were speculating about your situation. It was wrong of us, and wrong to do it where Tyler could hear." "What situation would that be?" "Your guest, the woman from the news." Mrs. Thompson pulled out her phone, showing Marcus a headline from that morning. "Ashford Properties CEO announces groundbreaking tenant initiative." Marcus scanned the article. Victoria's press release had made the business section. The story framed her decision to live in company-owned properties as bold leadership, with quotes from industry experts praising the innovative approach. There was a photo of Victoria looking professional and determined nothing about the exhausted woman who'd cried while reading to a 7-year-old. "So you know who she is?" "Everyone knows now. The press release went out this morning. There's a whole section about you, actually, about how you opened your home to help facilitate this initiative." Mrs. Thompson's expression shifted from apologetic to curious. "Is it true that she's really living with you to understand tenant perspectives?" Marcus weighed his response carefully. The official story was out there now, sealed in press releases and corporate statements. He could contradict it, tell Mrs. Thompson the messy truth, or he could stick to the narrative that protected both him and Victoria. "It's true. She's staying with me and my daughter temporarily, learning what it's like to live in the properties her company manages." Mrs. Thompson processed this. "That must be strange, having your boss live with you." "It's definitely different." Marcus kept his tone neutral. "But Zoe likes having her around, and I think Victoria's learning important things." "I'm sure she is." Mrs. Thompson stood. "Again, I'm sorry about Tyler. We've had a long talk about making assumptions and spreading rumors. It won't happen again." After she left, Marcus pulled out his phone and read the full article. Victoria had executed the communications strategy, perfectly transforming potential scandal into corporate innovation. The piece quoted the 3 other executives who'd be participating, all of them managing to sound enthusiastic about an assignment they'd probably been ordered to accept. There was a quote from Victoria near the end that made Marcus pause. "True leadership requires understanding the lives of everyone your decisions affect. I'm grateful to the Wellington family for welcoming me into their home and teaching me what that understanding looks like in practice." The Wellington family, as if they were a unit, a team. Marcus wasn't sure how he felt about being written into Victoria's official narrative, even if it protected them both. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Have you seen the news coverage?" Marcus replied. "Just read it. You're trending on LinkedIn." "Is that good or bad?" "Depends on what Donovan does with it." Three dots appeared and disappeared several times before Victoria's response came through. I'm about to find out. Board meeting in an hour. Marcus pocketed his phone and called Zoe over. They walked home slowly, his daughter chattering about the playground equipment and a butterfly she'd seen. Normal childhood observations that reminded Marcus why he'd agreed to any of this in the first place. Zoe deserved a childhood unburdened by adult complications. She deserved to talk about butterflies and swings and homework without navigating corporate politics and family secrets. But childhood wasn't a bubble he could maintain forever. The world would intrude whether Marcus wanted it to or not. The best he could do was teach Zoe how to navigate that intrusion with her integrity intact. At home, they made sandwiches for lunch and worked through more homework. Marcus's phone stayed mercifully quiet, but he found himself checking it compulsively anyway, waiting for news from Victoria, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came at 3:30. A call from Gerald. Marcus, need you to come in, now. Zoe's suspended from school today. She's home with me. Bring her. This can't wait. Gerald's voice carried an urgency that made Marcus's chest tight. Donovan Ashford wants to see you. In his office. In 1 hour. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. What's this about? He wouldn't say. But Marcus, Gerald's voice dropped. Bring that rental agreement your lawyer drafted. You're going to need it.